It's a difficult question because I don't think I'd survive for 15 seconds against either of them. Maybe if I put Piers Morgan in front of me, because obviously he's quite sizable. Welcome to One to One with Simon Jordan. Believe it or not, this is our 100th episode. 100 not out, to cricket parlance. But anyway, enough of the self-congratulation. Let's get on with the show. Whether PSG have created a monster in Mbappe or whether football has created a monster by the very nature of football finances, what you've got is a remarkable talent, and a talent that wants to control its own destiny. And when you're paying players the kind of money that we're now paying them, you're putting yourself in a situation where they're islands in their own minds. And then if they become national heroes and they're playing for the biggest club in France, you create this unique dynamic. Look, Real Madrid is a phenomenal football club in terms of an institution, and there's a different dynamic and expectation of who's bigger than whom in that scenario. The players aren't bigger than Real Madrid. The Galacticos mentality was a moment in time. They still buy the best players, but they are the biggest football club alongside Man United in the world. So they operate in a different way. PSG, with all due respect to my friend Nasser Al-Khelaifi, are a Fabergé egg. They're beautiful on the outside. I'm not sure there's so much substance in the inside of the football team. So with all that in mind, I think it changes the dynamic. But I was in Qatar and jumped into a car going to one of the games and sat with Mbappe's agent, and even my mouth dropped when I was told the sums of money that this kid is getting. Look, it's all about what you're prepared to do, and obviously if Khelaifi is not prepared to accept any more nonsense from him and he has to go at a certain time because he won't sign a new contract, then a commercial decision is being made. I think some of it gets played out in the media, and of course the media have always the desire for sensationalised attitude. I'm not sure that we see a detraction from his performances, we just see an expectation, and if, in all fairness, if we've seen situations at PSG where people like Leonardo have been slightly compromised, the technical director, because Mbappe wanted a certain coach or a certain way of playing, then they've created their own problems about, the tail wagging the dog. Good player, part of a team. Club is bigger than the player. If PSG have allowed that to get away from themselves, then that's their problem, and that may well be simply because the club itself doesn't have the same prestige, power, influence, and ultimate outcomes in terms of being the best team in Europe to control certain players. But we're seeing a saga that's only really playing out because the player's coming to the end of his contract and you've got a differing of the ways. So, look, the kid's young and he's remarkably talented, and he's going through a period of stretching his wings and pushing back and perhaps pushing the envelope. I don't like it, I've never liked it, but I also don't get into the characterisation that it's that much of a problem. We're talking about a player that doesn't want to sign a new contract. Don't want to sign a new contract, and you've got to sell him, then you've got to cut your cloth accordingly. You're the ones that paid 170, 180 million euros for him, and you're the ones that have now got a decision to make. If you won't sign a contract, sell him. Take what you can get, the best you can get, make Real Madrid pay, or whoever it is that's going to buy him, and move on, because PSG, despite my observations, is bigger than Kylian Mbappe. I mean, Chelsea will do what Chelsea have to do. They've spent a year finding their way through a new ownership. This time last year, a little bit earlier in the year, there was a concern about whether Chelsea were going to exist full stop. I didn't have that concern because obviously they were going to be bought, but there was a fan base that was worried about its future. Now there's a fan base that's apparently worried about its owners. Mistakes. People make mistakes. Anybody. You out there, me, everybody, we all make mistakes. Christ knows I've made enough. It's about how quickly you learn from those mistakes. The deterioration very quickly in a relationship with Tuchel meant a decision was made about two people not being able to work together. It happens. It's not necessarily Bowley's fault that people behave in a certain way. He makes a decision, brings in Potter. I thought it was a flight of fancy. And so now, he alights upon a manager that he wants, brings in Lampard for no reason that I can fathom, but perhaps it was just to bring some accord between the ownership and the fan base. Shouldn't have needed that because, people can give people a bit of latitude. You've got a guy that's come in through the door, spent $2.5 billion on buying a football club, and has spent a king's fortune on trying to prop it up with better players. You've now got a manager that you wanted, or that he wanted. You've now got a manager that's been close in the Premier League to achieving things. I don't think he'll get Chelsea winning the league, but I think he'll get them better. Going to the question about players, they've bought a lot of players in. Some of these players may well not be the players that people anticipated, but if Pochettino wanted certain players to have been retained, I would have thought that given the juice that he would have had in the conversations, given the fact that Chelsea were chasing him, that he would have been able to some extent, dictate who goes and who stays. Some would say Mason Mount was too late. Let me tell you something, nothing's too late. Cash is the greatest disinfectant. If they'd have come back to the table and given Mason Mount what he wanted and probably paid his father a fortune out of the transaction as well, then maybe he'd have stayed at Chelsea. But you know, when you're seeing players like Pulisic move on, and you're seeing players like possibly Callum Hudson-Odoi and maybe Ruben Loftus-Cheek, and it was always going to be that way. And people look at it as some sort of detraction from Chelsea that they're selling their academy players. Well, the academy players are often the ones that come through, the ones that are always behind the curve in terms of value inside a football club, and always the ones that will give you the most profit if you get it right, because they're all about, there's no cost implication to them. So I think they've got to get the balance right, and I'm comfortable that Pochettino will get them into a decent shape next year. People are obviously talking about the fact they've got no midfield at this moment in time. Let's wait and see. So no, I think they're cleaning it up, they're leaning it down. I think Josip stepped right out of the public domain. I think the lessons that will have been learnt from last season will be deployed, and Chelsea will be a far more effective outfit than they were last year. I'd rather face neither. I mean, both of them are remarkable bowlers. If I were to pick it, purely and simply because of the nature of speed kills, I would probably pick Mitchell Starc. If I wanted to retain anything vaguely resembling my midriff and my chin, it would definitely be Mitchell Starc. Primarily because Mark Ward is an absolutely phenomenal speedster. But Starc, on the other hand, is probably a slightly better bowler. It's a difficult question because I don't think I'd survive for 15 seconds against either of them. Maybe if I put Piers Morgan in front of me, because obviously he's quite sizable and would block out me, then maybe the pair of us could keep some sort of order against either one of them. But more importantly, we beat the bleeding Australians. That's the most important thing. And a large contributing factor to that was Mark Wood stepping on their throat in the first innings and being brave in England's second innings. So I'm delighted, I'm in a good mood. The last thing I wanted to hear was a bunch of crowing Aussies, first of all lecturing us last week about etiquette, when quite frankly, have we seen the way they behave at times? And this week, potentially, taking a liberty with us when we're at our most needy by winning this test. So Mark Wood, in my view, has elevated the series, and Mitchell Starc is always a challenge. But Mark Wood would be the one, if I was forced to choose, that I would try to avoid the nets. I don't like the expression about legacies. I think ultimately that's a construct of the media. People have playing careers, they do well, people look back on them fondly. The idea that legacy is everything, obviously, if you want to characterise it that way, he comes in at a time, right at the back end, or the very ending of Ferguson, the beginning of Moyes. I can't quite remember the exact time he comes in, but United have been in a difficult cyclical period. They haven't won things. He's been an outstanding goalkeeper at times and challenged at others. You don't get to be Man United's goalkeeper for 11, 12 years without being a really good goalkeeper. He followed a long list of good goalkeepers. So I think if you look back on him, I think from the moment he landed in the Premier League to being someone that couldn't catch crosses to someone now that goes out of the Premier League that can't play out from the back, there'll always be people that suggest he could have done more. I think he was a great shot stopper. I think they paid him far too much money. And I think unfortunately for him, he was the goalkeeper during a period of time when United were in decline for a significant part of it because the rest of the league got better and United had their moment in the sun. So I think De Gea did a job for United. I think he was a good goalkeeper. I think if United really needed to have replaced him over the years, they would have done. They wouldn't have given him a new contract 3 or 4 years ago, even though Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was behind it and paid him the kind of money that they did. I think top goalkeeper. I think if that's a legacy, you'd expect to be a top goalkeeper if you've kept goal for Man United for 12 years, wouldn't you? I don't think that should be the conversation at this moment in time. I think we should celebrate the 21s, not necessarily look to see how many of them we can shoehorn into the 24 European Championship side. We should look at the 21s achievements in isolation and say, remarkable. First time the team's won a tournament in 40 years. I think that comes down to very good domestic players playing in very good domestic academies, and ultimately a decent manager that's come in with a mentality that winning for the 21s is as important as producing players for the first team. If the players if there's a peppering of the under-21s that are good enough to get in the squad and in and around it, then that's good, because the more competition we have for the full side in the 2024 European Championships, the better it would be, because I think personally it could and possibly should be Gareth Southgate's last championship unless he pulls out something remarkable. So I look at it more as we're getting generations of younger players that are winning tournaments for England at younger levels. And from previous instances where we've had the 17s and Foden thrown out of that's become a full international, you would expect there to be some pushing and some jostling from the 21s pushing up, which is what you want, which is what the 21's for. So I don't look at it and go, well, that player should do it, this player should do it, because it's not necessary. If they're good enough through the 21s championship to have won it in the way that they did, and if next season they push domestically some of these players, then of course they've got to be in the conversation. Right, that's it for this week's edition of One to One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget to let me know your views on Chelsea slimming down their playing squad, Mbappe's behaviour at PSG, us giving the Aussies a bloody nose. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Keep watching these videos. We're on a break now for the summer, but we'll see you soon.